We love him.
Joining us now,
Absolutely
former
love him.
Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama, now in NBC News and MSNBC political contributor, Ben Rhodes. His new book is titled The World as It Is, a memoir of the Obama White House. And it's great to have you on.
You know, Ben, I have been very critical at times of Barack Obama's foreign policy, and I want to tell you this. When Barack Obama in 2007 in the debate said that he would talk to Iran unilaterally.
Yeah, and North Korea.
What a sign of weakness. Let me just tell you something. For all of Donald Trump's failings, Trump would never say that he would talk to Iran from a position not of strength,
unless
not
a
weakness.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Can you believe the Republicans that were critical of Barack Obama for 7, 8 years, who are now saying nothing about Donald Trump, saying, we don't want to even negotiate from a position of strength with Iran. We just want to talk to them.
Yeah. Well, or have this constant heaping of praise on Kim Jong-un. Also, President Obama had included North Korea on that list with Iran. And literally, people went into, complete conniption fits about it.
Have you seen the Fox News clips, the before and afters?
Yes, yeah.
Stunning.
And look, sometimes hypocrisy is just hitting you so hard in the face you don't know what to do with it. But the reality is, it just makes you question, is there any fundamental principle? I used to look to the Republican Party as the party that would be for the strongest possible line on Russia.
Right.
And the most suspicion of diplomacy with adversaries like Iran and North Korea.
Right.
I didn't always agree with those positions, but respected them as the bedrock principles of the Republican Party. Those are completely removed now, and the question is, what does the Republican Party therefore stand for on these national security?
You know what's so troubling? You look at Helsinki. What's so troubling is that since Helsinki, since the private meeting, forget about how Donald Trump made a fool of himself on the world stage, but that private meeting, now we have to ask ourselves, every time Mnuchin comes out and says, hey, let's lift sanctions on one of Putin's oligarch friends. Is that an order from Putin in that private meeting? Or, hey, let's start talking to one of Russia's most strategic allies in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Was he ordered to do that?
Yeah.
I could go down the list. One thing after another post-Helsinki suggests that Donald Trump is following somebody's script, and it's not his own.
Yeah. Well, if the script had been written for him that week by the Kremlin, here's what he would have done. He would have attacked NATO. Right. He would have picked a fight with Angela Merkel, who is the biggest antagonist of Vladimir Putin in Europe. He would have destabilized British politics more, which he did. And then he would have sat alone with Vladimir Putin like he did. And so the people who are also asking that question, Joe, are our allies. The reason you would normally have at least one person in that room is to read out the rest of the meeting to our government, but also to our friends. You don't want them wondering in London, in Berlin, in Paris, what did the U.S. president talk about alone? Never mind in Eastern Europe, where their very survival depends on our security guarantee. So none of our allies who depend on us for their security have any idea what he was talking about alone with Putin. And what they see is he's basically following a script that could have been written for him by the Kremlin, if it wasn't written.
And Mike, you also want somebody in the room with you. So a former KGB agent who deals in disinformation more than anybody else on the planet doesn't twist your words out of the proper context in their readout of the meeting.
Well, they're the only ones with a readout on the meeting, and they have whatever they had on them before, or potentially had on them before. They have even more now as a result of that meeting, given his public statements. But, Ben, as you know, it's hard to focus on things right below sea level because we're inundated every day with tweets and the Russia stuff and everything like that. But there's an impact to the American public right now because of the trade war that has begun. I mean, they're talking about 25% in China and things like that. When you were there, President Obama instituted TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Pact. So what was the objective of the Trade Pact? What difference would the Trade Pact have made if it hadn't been thrown out the window by the Trump administration right now on this burgeoning trade, dangerously burgeoning trade war?
Well, two things. One is we wanted to open up some of the biggest markets in Asia. But two, this is very important, that was a part of getting tough on China. There are huge problems that we have with China that we have to address in terms of our trade relationship. The way to go into that fight is to build your own team and isolate the Chinese. So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to organize the rest of Asia into a trade agreement with us so that then when we go into the fight with China, about what they're doing to our goods, about how they're stealing our intellectual property, we're in a much stronger position. The danger here is Trump is picking trade fights with our allies at the same time that he's doing with China, which gives him much less leverage and leaves us much more vulnerable because the rest of the world could gang up on us, and our workers, our farmers, our businesses are the ones who are going to hurt for that.
So he's not going to be able to get the European Union, Angela Merkel, and everything to join him in a concerted.
No, and that's when this comes home to roost with allies, right? When you need them in a scrap, whether it's a trade scrap or we're trying to go after terrorists, they're going to be much less likely to put skin in the game.
Are renegotiating with Iran again?
Yeah.
A bad. I believed it was a bad deal,
Yeah.
but getting out of it now only isolates the United States more.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do now, Willie, to get our European allies to at least stand at the side for a minute if we want to renegotiate certain terms that we may find undesirable.
I mean, you can go across
Can't
the
do
map,
it.
and then there's North Korea, where the president took
Yeah.
the meeting with Kim Jong-un, stepped away from the photo op, and within days declared North Korea is no longer a nuclear threat.
Yeah.
We know just from reporting this week they continue to produce fissile material. Actually, the Secretary of State testified to that. We know they continue to produce ballistic missiles. Perhaps a warhead could be attached to those ballistic missiles that could reach the United States. Is there ever a moment to trust North Korea? It seems that the President of the United States and this administration has sort of put a blind trust into
Yeah.
North Korea. Is that foolhardy?
Yes, and look, and Joe, you would have killed us if we walked away from a deal with Iran or North Korea that had no international inspections.
Oh, good Lord.
No
Yeah.
timeline for denuclearization.
Right.
You cannot trust anything they do unless there are international inspectors in there verifying it as they do it. My biggest concern, though, Willie, is he's so eager to make this a success. That hands so much leverage to the North Koreans because they know that Trump has to make this look like the biggest win ever. So all they have to do, is periodically, have some people into North Korea say they're blowing up some building. It could be any building, right? We don't know if they're not international inspectors in there. They have their nuclear weapons. They have their missiles. None of that is changing. And yet Trump is still praising their leader, giving them international legitimacy. You know that sanctions regime will start to fray, given how much he's heaping praise on Kim Jong-un.
Right. Which, by the way, to be fair, again, one of my complaints about the negotiations with Iran is I thought that the president and the Secretary of State wanted that deal too much. But my God, you had painstaking negotiations,
Yeah.
time and time again. There was a back and forth. It was tense. It took a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't love the outcome of the deal.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people like David Ignatius who said, yes, it's a gamble. It's a cosmic gamble. But if it pays off, man, there'll be a great result. Here, you have Donald Trump just winging it on the world stage
Yeah.
and actually holding them, not holding them to account at all.
Well, and if you think about it, Joe, there's not a single international inspector in there. There's no timeline whatsoever for them to give up their nuclear weapons. But also, when he's saying this leader is beloved by his people, one of the things you think about in government is how is this going to run on their state television?
Right.
They're watching that in the gulag today. I'm sure that they are playing in a loop the president of the United States saying that Kim Jong-un is beloved by his people.
Yeah.
He has handed him what every dictator wants, which is that validation.
So remember, he said, I should get my people to act like that.
Oh, I know. I wish my people would
Oh, that
treat
would
me
be an
that
Idi
way.
Amin.
I mean, he admires
Yeah,
him.
we're getting into Idi Amin territory
Yeah.
here. See, I get to say Idi Amin again.
One of the kids called
Seventh
again.
caller wins Rice-A-Roni.
Yes.
San Francisco treat for a
Thank you,
lifetime.
Jerry.
Ben, let's take a step back. I want to ask you about a couple of things that happened over the 8 years that President Obama was in office. I remember at the beginning of your term being out on a book tour with Dr. Brzezinski and Mika, and he was talking about the possibilities of Turkey being a bridge between Europe and the Middle East. And there was great hope.
Yeah.
And he believed that if Turkey could be turned, it would make such a huge difference in both regions. Obviously, over those 8 years, for internal reasons, that just hasn't happened. Where are we now? Who is Turkey to the United States of America? Are they an ally? Are they an adversary? At what point do we say, enough, Erdogan, enough?
Well, the fact is, Turkey is one of those countries that it's gone from being an ally. I mean, and they're in NATO, right? So we have a formal alliance relationship with them, to being one of those countries that's a mixed bag, where we do work with them on some very important things, right? I mean, we do depend on them for some counterterrorism cooperation. But the fact is, what happened over the last 8 years is Erdogan has just turned into an authoritarian. And every decision that he makes is through the prism of, does this empower me? And that is dangerous for us because when he needs to work against us or when he needs to demagogue us or blame us for things, he's going to work against our interests.
But what you're saying and what a lot of other foreign policy leaders are saying is we can't tell Erdogan to go to hell because there are some strategic ways that Erdogan and Turkey still help the United States.
Yes, and he has a huge amount of leverage on Europe with these refugee deals that he makes to stop the flow of refugees up into Europe. I would like to see us get tougher on him, though. I think he gets too much of a pass, particularly for what he's doing internally. A lot of what he's doing internally, though, Joe, is there's few countries on earth, certainly countries that we thought of once as democracies, that are harder on journalists and independent media than Turkey.
Right now, I mean, at least last year, he was the hardest.
Yeah, and
as far as jailings, killings.
And the U.S. is squandered, when we're calling the press the enemy of the state here, our ability to say to Erdogan, you got to let these journalists out of prison, that's gone.
All right, so Ben, stay with us. You still speak regularly with President Obama, and we want to get your take on what he's thinking about what's happening looking up to the midterms. He just announced dozens of new endorsements for the midterms, and it is interesting who is not on the list. That is next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.